Alright, welcome to part 2. This part's going to cover template making and probably the shins and the feet. Full disclaimer, if you hear any purring in this video, we got someone's here sitting on my lap. This is apparently where she wants to be for this episode, so see what happens. Alright, so when I build projects like this, especially the really big stuff, I will try to push my detailing process back as far as humanly possible. Scaling is a huge issue, not just with this build, but with any big build like this. It's a lot easier to fix any kind of scaling issues before you put any detailing work in, because after that, you know, everything's kind of set in stone, you can't do anything. I used to see this all the time in cosplay groups. So for example, you'd see somebody, they'd post one day, you know, they made this really cool gauntlet for this suit. It's like, alright, that looks awesome. Next week, hey, I made the chest piece. Super detailed. Everything's on it. All the freaking little details. Looks amazing, you know. And they keep doing this with every piece individually, and by the time they get most of it done, they put it on to show it all together, and it looks bad. Like, in cosplay, there's this term people will use, the silhouette of your character. Just like a normal silhouette, it's the outline of your character. So if your character's defining feature is, you know, giant pauldrons, well, you know, if your chest is too big and your gauntlets are too big and your pauldrons are too small, you might have all that detail in, but if those defining features of your character aren't there, it's not going to sell that character. You know, I see this all the time in the cosplay groups, and then all of a sudden, you know, that person had just shown that everything together, nothing really fits, and then that's the last you ever hear about it. You know, like a month or two goes by, you're like, whatever happened to that thing that person was working on? It was looking super cool. I'd have had this same exact thing happen to me in the past too. What happens is, you know, you kind of built yourself into a corner. It's like, well, I need to adjust this, but the piece is already done, so I have to pretty much make a new piece or completely tear down what I made, which at that point it's not salvageable, so you pretty much have to make a new piece. At that point you're almost making a whole new suit, so you kind of just let it sit for a bit, and, you know, like a month or two goes by, and eventually it's, you know, you just abandon the project, you gave up on it. If you push the detailing phase back as far as you possibly can until you have everything done to its most basic shape, so you can work on getting those proportions correct, that'll save you from abandoning your projects. I know this for a fact because I have so many abandoned projects under my belt, it's unbelievable. So every piece that I have made so far, from what I'll show in this episode and then in the next episode, they are at their most basic shape. There's no details, no trim, no nothing. It is the bare bones shape of what it is. Once I get it shaped, what I'll then do is I'll start working on harnessing. I'll start making all the straps that holds everything together, holds everything in place. Then I'll start test fitting, and if something seems too big, too small, too whatever, I can adjust it then and there, and then after that, try it on again. Try as many pieces on as I can. Make sure everything is working together with everything around it. You know, your piece might look great on its own, but when it's next to something else, if something's too big or small, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. Avoiding any detail, that helps prevent, you know, any missteps in your build process. Helps eliminate the downtime, more or less. But, I mean, I get it, because detailing is my favorite part of building a costume. I'm sure it's, of everyone who builds costumes, it's their favorite part of building a costume, is the detailing phase. That's the time when your costumes come to life, you know? And that's where your real pride and joy comes in, too, because, you know, it's like, oh, shape's right, but, you know, I'm proud of these little tiny things. When in reality, you know, from like 10 feet away or on the other side of a convention, no one's gonna see all the details you put in. It is kind of weird, like, you're when it comes to doing detail, because it will as much as you put into it, once you apply paint, you don't see that much of it anyway. So focus on getting the scaling and proportions correct, because that's what people are going to see first before they even approach you. If your proportions aren't right, they're not going to approach you to get close enough to see the detail. So always save the detail for last. Alright, so on to the templates then. So in my last episode, I had mentioned how I had made my scale reference images. I had taken a grid pattern that represented 1 by 1 foot squares, and then overlaid that over my images, my reference images, which were in profile shots, front and side, and I used those to determine my scaling of my costume, or my costume to be, I guess. With that, I then transferred that to cardboard. So what I did was I drew out 1 foot by 1 foot squares, and then I did everything I could to draw out those images into those squares that I had for the piece I was working on. So since I was working with the boots and the shins together, I drew them both together. Once I got the profiles of those two, I cut them out. I tried to find their center line as best as I could, and then I took the side profile along with the front profile, taped them together so that I could start making a 3D representation of that piece out of cardboard. I'm essentially 3D modeling the piece in real space with cardboard. So I'd first start with just a side profile, then I used half of a front profile, and then I would round off pieces with extra cardboard, taping it all together, round off any edges I can, trying to find that exact shape and definition that you would get from the image. A little bit of guesswork, but not a ton. As long as you know what you're dealing with, you can just keep going until you have something that is full enough that you can then start wrapping in plastic wrap to get your full shape. And from there, it becomes basically just a classic duct tape pattern. You'll see these a lot for some cosplayers. Well, they'll say, for example, they'll wrap their arm in plastic wrap and then in duct tape, draw their gauntlet design, cut it out, lay it out, and then that's their template. This is the same exact thing. Yeah, so I wrapped the cardboard model out of... You see this, right? Yes, Sable, you're cute. Yeah, so I'd wrap the entire 3D model, the cardboard 3D model, I guess, in plastic wrap, and then I'd wrap it in duct tape. Not too crazy, maybe 1 or 2 layers of duct tape, that's it. Then I'd take a magic marker, Sharpie, whatever, then I'd outline the edges and start working on my actual templates for that. So I'd mark the edges of where I'd be cutting. Of course, this template's only going to be 1/2 of the actual piece, because it is a symmetrical piece. The inside is the same as the outside, so whatever I have here, I can just flip it around and then combine them together when I need to. So where those two pieces would then combine down the center, I would make my tab marks then and there, so I knew where to connect pieces, so I wouldn't have to stretch things too much in one way or another. Once I got the outline of everything drawn in the duct tape, then I'd start cutting it from the other side until I could get it off of the model. Set the model aside, and then I would cut out everything up to the marker marks, and the excess just got thrown out. But from right there, I had my duct tape pattern, but of course that piece is still shaped like what I need to. And I need to transfer this to sheet foam, which is flat. So I need this template to be flat. This is super easy. What I do is I'll find the highest point that's sticking up, and I'll just cut a straight line through it until it lays flat. One of two things is going to happen. You know, it's either gonna, when you cut it, it's either going to split apart or it's going to overlap. If it's bulging up, when you cut it, it's going to spread. If it's bulging down, it's going to overlap. If it's overlapping, you're going to have to take that cut the whole way across until it's off, and just cut it off completely. And just make sure you mark so you know exactly where it's going to fit back together afterwards. That's how you kind of differentiate between a piece that's just got a giant split in it, or a piece that's just a separate piece on the side that has to get glued together later. With this one, that's kind of how that worked. For the bottom section, I had to cut that one off, and then everything after that up top was just splits. But once I got that all laying down flat, I was able to start tracing it to sheet foam. It became about 4 pieces for the front, inner, outer, one leg, and then the other, so 4. If you do end up making multiple separate pieces that you have to cut out, always remember to label and number them. So, for example, on this one here, if I can see this, we have F1L, F2L, F3L, F4L, F5L. Front 1 left, front 2 left, front 3 left, you know, not here, you know, F1R, F2R, and so on and so forth. And then back here I don't have them labeled, but if it was, it'd be like B1, B2 for back 1, back 2. But yeah, label them like that makes it super easy for you to keep everything in order, so you can, when you go to start gluing things together, you know exactly where it goes and it cannot get mixed up with anything else. Yeah, so then once everything was traced to sheet foam, it just became a matter of cutting it all out. As far as the shins go, there were no crazy angle cuts. Everything was a straight cut, so it was straight down 90-degree angle cuts. No fancy 45s or anything. Then once it was all cut apart, glued together with some contact cement. Being as big as it is with how many bends, it was a pain in the butt to actually get the 2 halves to glue together. I ended up giving them several coats, and then once that was done, I was actually folding the whole thing over onto itself in just hopes to get that little bit of extra push in the top corners, and then I flip it upside down and do the same thing again. It was a pain in the butt, but it finally stuck. And that gave us, again, our, whoops, sorry. That gave us our shin piece. But yeah, you can see where I started marking circles out for, these were originally on the template I think I'd made in paper, and I just kind of had them set aside, and I still have them set aside, so that I can start putting the actual like joint pieces in later. Before I finish harnessing the bottom half, I am going to have to start putting these in, because these are actually the mounting points for where the harness is going to be to hold the upper legs to this. But that's like 3 videos from now. Portion wise, they were a little narrow to start. I had to redo the back and make them a little bit bigger. It wasn't anything terrible. I think I just had to make them about like an extra inch on both sides. After that came the feet, which were fun. For the shoes, I just used a cheap pair of Walmart loafers. And then I used some foam packaging blocks. I don't think I'm allowed to say where I got these, but I didn't buy them. But they were also getting thrown out, so I don't think a certain work is going to miss them. I pulling them out of the garbage at work. They are EVA foam. They're very high density, and they're basically packaging foam blocks. I pulled a handful out of the garbage can. They're always getting thrown out, so I usually tell truck drivers, like, hey, if you're throwing any of them out, just give me 1 or 2. I only need like 4 total. By the end of the day, everyone's like, here's like 8, and I'm like, I only need 4. But yeah, you can find them scattered throughout the factory. I shouldn't be saying all that stuff. No talking about work. So anyway, yes, I glued them together and on top of the shoe and all that fun stuff. And then I used that up against the paper template, or the cardboard template, for the shoe to kind of figure out exactly how I wanted the toe to be able to bend and all that. Because one thing I wanted out of this project was to have the toes be articulated. That's something you normally don't see in large suit costumes, and it's also something I wanted to do to the Terminator Chaplain that I didn't get to do. It'll make walking 100 times easier. But yeah, so this required a little bit of modifying of the actual shape of the foot, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I'm still modifying it a little bit. So what I wanted was, I wanted the toe to clear the foot itself and also not interfere with it. But it also meant that I needed the actual foot itself to be high enough so that nothing would get jammed up. So I was constantly reworking the shape of the toe, the height of the foot opening, for all that to actually be able to work so it wouldn't hit my shoe, my platform, and all that. But also, it was tricky, to be sure. Yeah, once I got the 2 pieces about how I wanted, the process then became the same exact thing. I had the toe and the foot. I made the exact same kind of cardboard template with that. I already had the side profile, so I made a half a front profile, taped that to it, started working out the shape. Once I filled in enough detail, gave it plastic wrap, duct tape, started drawing my outlines of where I wanted the actual shape of everything to be on the template, cut that out, made my marks, cut it off the mold, did my best to try and lay that piece down flat, made my cuts where I needed to get it to lay flat, and then transferred that to EVA sheet foam, cut that out, glued it together. Yeah, after I had both pieces made, there were still some issues I had. The shoe was just way too big in the end. I ended up having to redo a lot of stuff. Not so much redo, but modify. So I had to shrink down the foot a little bit, shrunk down the toe, but still tried to keep everything so it interacted well. It's okay now, but still not perfect. I need to make a few more adjustments, but it's in a state right now where it's fine. Once I get back to the detailing phase on that, then I'll go into more detail and adjust them farther as needed to get them closer to what I want. But I don't want to mess with it too much because I still want the mechanism to work how I want it. So I got to keep that in mind as I'm working out detailing stuff like the trim of the sole of the shoe and stuff like that. So as of now, the shape of it's okay. Around this time too, I started working out the metal flaps that are kind of in between the foot and the shin. Covers the front and back. These are going to help hide a lot of the toe travel, I noticed, and that's going to do me a huge service too in terms of things not looking as pretty when the toe goes to go back and recess into the foot, because that metal plate in the front is going to cover that entire movement. So I don't need it to be 100% perfect, which is great because I don't have to worry about anything binding up on the way back down. Because the last thing I want is for it to come up but then not back down. So that's going to give me a little bit of playroom, and I like that. So once I was happy with all that, came time to glue the actual platforms to the foot. That required an enormous amount of contact cement and glue. A ridiculous, smelly, nauseating amount of contact cement and glue. It took a while to dry, and it took several coats because I wanted to make sure it was staying. Once I got that done, there was also a worry about, even though the platform was fine, if you were to look inside the shoe, you'd have your platform, but then you'd have about 2.5 inches of dead space before you hit the sidewalls of the foot. So I had a can of expanding foam, and I filled the entire bottom of the foot around the platform and That will hold everything in place and make it nice and rigid enough that it's not going to flex. I'm not going to rely on it to really give me any support, in hopes that if I did press on it too much in a corner, it might actually pop. I don't know, but it's solid enough the whole way around. But of course, expanding foam takes a couple days to fully cure, and I think after I was doing that, I was going to be going to work for the next couple days, and I didn't want a certain somebody playing around with it. So I end up wrapping the entire front and top end of that foot cover in duct tape. I wanted no way for her little feet to get inside that. I mean, I could have also just closed the door down here, but this kind of seconds is her playroom. She surprisingly doesn't use any of my costumes as a scratching post, which I'm surprised, because she uses everything else as a scratching post. But yeah, anytime I'm down here, she has to be down here. If she's not upstairs, she's down here playing. My craft room is her playroom. So I didn't want to lock her out. So I just made sure she couldn't mess with it. That way, the last thing I would want would be to come home and her covered in expanding foam. That would not be cool. Yeah, so I would grab the actual toe piece too, but someone's still sitting on my lap. So a couple other things that I had done to this. So you can see on the actual platform, I had cut out an angle here. So what that's going to allow me to do is when I go to get my foot rocking, this is as much as I can actually rock the foot forward, which is more than enough. So what'll happen then is when this is at full tilt, your shoe will be maxed up in here, and when it comes down, that's gonna flat back out, and that'll flatten down. I also sandwiched this little strap in between the base of this and in between the platform, because I figured I'm gonna need something to help kind of hold that center. I'll have more, but I figured at least have something in the middle in the meantime. I might have to trim it. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do this yet. I'm kind of winging it, really. But yeah, so you can see all the expanding foam inside there now. It's not pretty. It doesn't have to be. It's not going to be seen. It's just enough to make sure that all this is nice and sturdy, you know. That way nothing's going to shift if I hit a corner or something. But yeah, like I said, both of them are going to need a lot more work. I'm not super worried about it yet until I get to actually detailing. Oh no, am I playing with your tail? I think your tail's playing with my hand because you keep slapping me with it. Uh-oh. Now she's getting playful. Yeah, we'll cut this video here. That's the shins and the legs, or the shins and the feet. Yeah. Up next should be arms and legs, or midsection, or maybe all of it. Super easy stuff, might go by fast. We'll see.